Among the peoples of the Natal region in South Africa, the most common greeting is Sawubona. It's kind of like hello or good day, Sawubona, which literally means I see you. And the response is Sikona, which means I am here. And the order is important. I see you, I am here. Before I see you, you don't exist. I bring you into existence. You are reliant on my help and my presence, and so you are present. It is the foundation of Ubuntu. I exist because others help me exist. We are in relationship and in harmony with one another as neighbors and friends and foe and creation. We are dependent on one another. I see you. I am here. One of the earliest games that we play with young infants is peekaboo. I see you. And from a very young age, we approach a newborn child and we place our hands over our face and then we open them and we say, peekaboo, I see you. And we see the delight growing on their face and they begin to laugh and giggle. And then when we close our hands back, their face turns to consternation and an upset and dismay. We have literally disappeared. And then the game opens again and the delight comes back, and then the dismay, and then the delight. Object permanence is an important part of our development. Somewhere around the 8-month mark is when we understand that even though we cannot be seen, we are not out of mind. And it's only around the 8-month mark that we begin to see how a child plays the game differently. As soon as we cover our hands over, they begin to reach for the fingers to peel them back, knowing full well that somehow you are there. Peekaboo, I see you. I see you. I am here. For 100 years, more than 3 generations, Church of the Transfiguration, you have claimed the highest point in the city of Toronto and given a name that names a numinous moment when Peter, James, and John were allowed to peel back the fingers of time and to slowly see revealed, hidden from sight, who Jesus was on the top of a mountain when suddenly flooded with light, and there standing with him are Moses and Elijah. Moses, the giver of the law, the one who would bring a people from Egypt through the wilderness to the promised land, and Elijah, the prophet who would go toe-to-toe with King Ahab and Jezebel to bring a people home. And imagine that moment at the top of the mountain when the disciples, the 3 of them, were moved beyond the temporal to the eternal, from chronos, or ordinary time, into kairos, God time. I have often wondered what the 3 of them talked about. Imagine what they would have talked about. And sometimes I think they didn't say a word, because it was their presence that was enough encouragement, enough hope. Like showing up at the bedside in a hospital for a family member or friend, or standing at the back of the church with a cup of coffee after a funeral with a family member whose heart is breaking, or picking up the phone to speak to somebody you know who's going through a hard time. It's not the words that you remember, it's the presence. And Peter and James and John longed to make that moment permanent, to keep it, to hold it, and to build walls around it, to preserve it as though it would protect them forever. But Jesus knew in that moment that the transfiguration was not something to be kept. It was an affirmation, a reaffirmation, a confirmation that the path on which he was going, as he was passing through dismay and hurt and consternation and fear and upset, was to reach the place of joy and wonder and delight that no face could ever contain. For 100 years, Church of the Transfiguration, starting from a humble beginning under a tent and putting down roots in this place to take on your own way that same path, to open the eyes of the blind, to proclaim good news to the poor and release to the captives. And what a delight it is to be back with you, this time in the building and not just on the hill. And to be here with you, Michael, as you begin your ministry and to set down your roots deep in this place. And you bring such gifts of leadership and enthusiasm and teaching and preaching of the gospel and social justice and making the world a better place. You are such a gift. And I hope and pray that the two of you, the community and yourself, will deepen those roots even more. And while our clergy are important, we know that it is all of us who form the body of Christ, given gifts that God has bestowed on each of us. And when we say yes to offering our time, talent, and treasure, the mystical body of Christ comes into our midst, and we become part of that body, not trying to hold it and preserve it, but to have the courage to follow in the same footsteps. It is a wonderful thing to have watched Anglicans right across the Diocese of Toronto, including Church of the Transfiguration, who during the last 2 years of pandemic did not simply cloister behind closed doors, but became the church in a whole new way of allowing yourselves to move beyond the place of comfort in order to pursue how God is calling us to the next thing. And so as you step into the next century, I pray, God, that you will be wrapped with the same spirit that James and Peter and John experienced at the top of the mountain that fuels you on your journey. And to Procy and to Henry today, a moment that marks a different beginning as you take deeper steps on your journey into the future. You are an inspiration to all of us, and you call out of us the faith that has been given to us. And then we have that wonderful reading today, the prodigal son, that shows us something about the pitfalls and the joys of the journey. It's one of those stories that we know by heart. If I just closed the book and asked us to retell the story from the beginning to the end, we could tell it together. And it is through that lens, I see you, I am here, that we listen to the story again. Context is everything. Jesus and his disciples are on their way to Jerusalem, and a crowd has assembled. Luke says, all of the tax collectors and the sinners drew near to him. Not some of them, not a few of them, all of them. Imagine that. Why would they make that effort? To go and to listen to yet another religious leader? What is it about his voice that resonates with them? What is it that he speaks that they yearn for? I think deep down it's because they know that Jesus sees them. He sees their brokenness. He sees their duplicitous life. He sees their humanity. he sees the part of them that longs to find their way home, to come to themselves. And they hang on every word. And in the midst of that same crowd are the scribes and the Pharisees. And they have a different posture, don't they? And they grumble under their breath. And they say, he eats with tax collectors and sinners. Counting on their own holy piety and their education and their place and their prominence that somehow puts a distance between them and Jesus and the tax collectors and sinners. And Jesus is so clever. Rather than pointing out their failings, he invites them to be part of the story and weaves the story around them in their presence to remind both, I see you. So today's story is brought to you by the prodigal son being played by the tax collectors and the sinners, and the older brother being played by the part of the Pharisees and the scribes. And we know the story. The prodigal son leaves home. We do not know what motivated him to leave home. Maybe he just couldn't live up to the expectations of his older brother. Maybe he was rebellious. Maybe he needed to break out on his own. But he goes to his father and he says, Dad, I'd like my part of the inheritance. Imagine saying that to your parents. I know how well that wouldn't go. Imagine how audacious and disrespectful that is. And desperate too. Parents know their children. They sometimes know them better than the children. Somehow he must have known that just this amount of money might preserve him for some time. And so he hands it over. And the son leaves town. And he goes to a foreign place and he squanders it in dissolute living. I will allow your imagination to imagine what dissolute living is. You can write it down later if you'd like. And the money runs out. And there is a famine in the land. And when you are desperate, you will do almost anything to make ends meet. And today we watch one man's bottom, which is feeding the pigs. To a devout Jew, feeding the pigs would have been bottom. And he comes to himself. He comes to his senses. We understand that moment as turning around, metanoia, repentance. Repentance means to literally turn around, to wake up, to open your eyes, to see, to be present, and to present yourself to God. And he works it through his own mind. I will go home, and I will be treated not like a son, but live under the same house. And you can imagine that his whole way home, he was practicing what he was going to say to his father. He would have been playing out every angle. And meanwhile, his father is sitting on the front veranda and he sees his son coming from a distance. And he has compassion. Compassion does not grow from here or from here. Compassion grows from here. It is so deep. And we can imagine that compassion was growing in the father because he could see how broken his son had become. Crummy clothes, no shoes on his feet, loss of weight, but he knew his son. And rather than taking a posture like this, he runs with all of his might and he stoops down, and his son does not even get to say all that he wanted to say. When his father says, put a ring on his finger and put sandals on his feet and let's have a party. Because this son of mine was dead, but he is alive. He was lost, but now is found. Imagine how the tax collectors and the sinners would have heard that part of the story. Meanwhile, as the music is playing, along comes the older son, and he catches word that the younger son is home. They've killed the fatted calf. They're having a huge feast, and he adopts a posture like this. And he has every right to feel self-righteous in that moment. And I think most of us can identify with the older brother. Prudent, responsible, doing our part, supporting the family, and to hear the music coming from inside would harden your heart. And out comes the father, like the younger son, running to the son, and you can see him in pleading like an 8-month-old, pulling at the fingers to help open the eyes of his older son so that he can see what's happening below the surface. Your brother was dead, he is alive. He is lost and now is found. And so are you. When your heart is hardened, how far away from home you are. The wonderful thing about that story is that it doesn't resolve itself, which gives you and I an opportunity to actually be part of the story and the audience too. And we understand ourselves and know ourselves well enough. Most of us in this room have lived life long enough to know that there are things that we have squandered. And there have been inheritances that we have spent. And there have been moments when we have felt at the bottom. And there are moments when we have stiffened our hearts and walked by in judgment of others, presuming to be more important than our neighbor or one who doesn't quite look like us. And the story reminds us, and Jesus reminds us, that the Father, God, constantly announces to us on our journey, I see you, and I am here. And it's time to come home. Amen.